In January 1947, Short was found in Leimert Park, Los Angeles. A mother, out walking with her child, made that grisly discovery. Elizabeth naked and cut in half, her body drained of blood and left in an empty lot. The case was splashed across newspapers nationwide. Her killer was never found. Or was he? And of course, I was very close to my father in the last 10 years of his life. And there's no way, I said, I know Dad was, had some sex problems, and I believe with the incest. But murder, no way. Steve Hodel is a retired LAPD homicide detective. His father, Dr. George Hodel, was a suspect in the Black Dahlia case. One of his daughters, Tamar, also accused him of sexual abuse. George was tried and acquitted in the highly publicized case. But Steve didn't know this until he struck up a conversation with her after their father died in 1999. I started talking with Tamar, my half-sister, who I hadn't really spoken to in about 50 years, and she basically says comes out of nowhere, and our phone conversations. Well, our dad was a suspect in the Black Dahlia murder. And I'm saying, what are you talking about tomorrow? Where the hell is this coming from? And she says, well, he didn't do it, but he was a suspect. 14 years into retirement, Steve started researching Black Dahlia, initially to vindicate his dad. Once he saw the evidence mounting, it became hard for him to ignore. I found actual original receipts for 50-pound sacks of cement during the week that she was murdered at the house, and they were at the crime scene. So we've got the physical evidence connecting, but one of the most important things are the secret tapes, where they bugged the house for 6 weeks and got it actually tape recorded his confessions to the murder of his secretary, to the Black Dahlia murder, and to payoffs to law enforcement, to performing abortions. All of this was on tape and hidden away. The Dye's office, Steve says the case was tight, and authorities were literally looking for him to lock him up before they could get the chance. George skipped town in 1950 and started another life and family in the Philippines 40 years later. He'd leaked Manila and moved back to the U.S. Steve says his family is split on George's involvement in the case. There's 11 children by 5 different women, so mostly they are on board. He married a Filipino when he left the country, and there had 4 children there. They're not on board. They're like, no way our father could be a serial killer. Steve has written several books combining what the FBI and LAPD found with the evidence he continues to come across. This was all sub-rose on my part secret until I presented him in secret to a head active Steve K, who was co-counsel on the Charles Manson case, and he reviewed it for like 4 months and said, I got a tough filing policy, but I would file one kind of murder on your father. Worry alive, and the witness is available. I got some more information about that trial you might be interested in. The family is complicated. History returns to the forefront in TNT's limited series. It centers around a fictional reporter named Jay Singletary, played by Chris Pine. He's investigating the very real case of Fauna Hodel. Steve's niece Fauna is mother. Tamar gave her up for adoption to a black family. Fauna spent much of her life believing her birth father was black, which turned out to be false. The show is based on her 2008 book, One Day She'll Darken. It follows her journey as she learns exactly who her family is, revealing the fact that George was her grandfather. He's the key. Can you do it? Steve says he doesn't plan on watching the series because of the fictional elements. However, he is part of the Root of Evil podcast, also being released, in part with TNT detailing his work. The irony of it all isn't lost on Steve, a kid who grew up to be a homicide detective at the very station house that held evidence alleging his father was not only the Black Dahlia killer, but may have been responsible for other deaths. Too much to my surprise. It wasn't just that there were serial crimes, there was a bunch of phone woman murders that occurred in LA, and he was responsible for about, I believe, 10 or 12 of those. Yeah, and an LAPD was actively looking at the Dye's office. We're also looking at him for other murders. It's not just me again, it sits there were 4 or 5 that they were looking at. I would eventually come up with about a dozen. In that period before he split, proving in this case, it's so complex and involved a story, and it's like you couldn't make this story up. It's the old saying, you know, truth, far stranger than fiction.